You think that doubling down on a losing proposition is really the right way to proceed at this point? But that's exactly what they're doing. When you ask how Trump weighs things, I think actually, and seriously, and it also sounds a bit petulant on my side, but I think it's true. This is a stupid man. This is not a man making detailed, sophisticated calculations. From everything I know, and I don't know him personally, but I know a lot of people who do know him personally. I do know a lot of people who interact with him. This is an old man, impetuous, impulsive, not knowledgeable, easily swayed, and unable to pay attention to briefings, unable to study a problem. So, in weighing things, I don't believe that we're actually seeing a rational calculator making difficult, complex calculations. I think we are seeing an impulsive old man who is way out of his depths, surrounded by the least competent group that I have ever seen in American politics. And that's saying a lot, by the way, because we are not a competently run
He's pretty savvy to
country.
economic shocks, though. He does react to when
No,
there are
he's
economic.
sensitive, but not savvy.
Right.
He's sensitive to them. So
Mm.
yes, that's why he can swerve and lie and confabulate day by day if he sees the stock market going down. Well, that's not savvy. That is just
Reactive.
vulnerable and impulsive. He's scared, and he scared may not be the right word. Delusional might be. He thinks he's in control in a situation that he's not in control, and so I think he makes up things. When we saw the calling off of the 48-hour
Yeah.
warning,
The
uh,
pause.
he didn't say I'm calling it off because of circumstances and we're going to pursue other approaches. He said we've had 2 days of detailed negotiations and we've essentially settled the political issues. We're close to a deal. Now, how can one interpret a statement like that? I think it's a fascinating question, which was completely ignored. Everybody said, well, he needed a quick off ramp because the markets were tanking. Some people said this is an opportunity to front run the markets and make a lot of money, which perhaps is also true. But I take a different question on this. The President of the United States makes a statement that is completely false and demonstrably so within moments. What does one make of that? It's not sophisticated lying. It's not deception. It's not Machiavellian politics. It is making a statement that is disproved in a moment. To my mind, that by itself is a pathology that should be analyzed directly. What does it mean? Well, the easiest interpretation is that he's an inveterate liar, and nobody doubts that. But there's another interpretation, which is that he is delusional, that at this stage he is confabulating. And when I listen to sophisticated psychiatrists and psychologists talk about Trump's mental state, they say that he is mentally unstable, suffers from what is called the dark triad personality of psychopathy, extreme narcissism, extreme chronic and impulsive lying, and no small amount of paranoia. And then they go on to say, at least some of them that I find quite credible, that there's evidence that this man is experiencing dementia on top of these lifelong traits. He's an
Mm.
old man, and he can't finish sentences coherently. Often he can't finish words coherently. That apparently, according to the psychologists, is a sign of frontotemporal dementia.
Hmm.
I think this is not uninteresting from a geopolitical reality because we tend to normalize anything. We think he's making calculations. We ask what his next move is. I don't find this the right approach. I find, more importantly, the fact that we have a breakdown of any kind of rational process in the most powerful country in the world, the far more dangerous, likely reality right now. That this does not make sense. That this is not savvy calculations, that this is not a stable situation, that this is an extremely dangerous situation by a small group flailing around completely out of its depths. And when I add in Mr. Netanyahu, whom I regard as the world's greatest war criminal at large today, who has instigated wars across his region for, again, to my mind, malignant ideas and delusional ideas, then I think the situation is even more fraught. In other words, maybe I'm wrong, and often what I'm saying is not the right way to think about problems like this, but I think that there's a strong personalistic element to this crisis right now, which also would suggest a different kind of approach. What I'm suggesting every day is that the Prime Minister of India, the President of Russia, the President of China speak to Mr. Trump and explain this is not right, this is not working, this has to stop, rather than seeing this as the great chessboard or battlefield of the great powers, that this is a delusional environment where the chief delusional figure, Mr. Trump, needs to be helped to stop the disaster that the United States has caused.
You took the name of these three countries, but President Trump likes to put his faith in his favorite field marshal of Pakistan. What do you see their role over here in this mediation process? It got rejected by Iran initially, and I think they're still going on.
Frankly, I see it as bizarre. And I see it as a lost opportunity of the BRICS countries because India has the presidency of the BRICS. He can speak to Mr. Trump. The BRICS represent half of humanity. They represent the superpowers. They represent the rapidly growing part of the world economy. They would be listened to. The idea that this has somehow become Pakistan's base for negotiation is, in a way, because India let this happen. It did not find an effective response as it should have right from the beginning. And I think it's not effective. It can't really work this way. It should not work this way. And again, I appeal to the BRICS countries because that is a grouping that is powerful, sensible, has a clarity, wants to defend a true international system. And again, looking from the outside, it seems to have been waiting on India. I don't know if that's true, but that's the perception that Russia and China and Brazil and South Africa and others are saying we have to intervene as a group, make a statement. But at least one narrative is that India, with the Prime Minister just having come back from Israel of all places, was resistant to intervene to help the United States stand down, and that delayed things. And then suddenly we read that Pakistan is going to be mediator. It makes little sense in my view.
What do you think the contours of a talk like that would be? Like, what would these countries tell President Trump to A, stop, not go ahead with an invasion, and B, what would the contours of a deal with Iran look like that would be palatable to America, where America salvage its honor and Iran continues in the way it is with with a missile production program or a nuclear program that may not precipitate another war down the line?
Well, I think that it's quite clear that several things are rather complicated and on the table right now. The first is that Iran does not want to be attacked once again in a brazen way. Iran has been the target of U.S. sanctions and war efforts for actually more than 45 years at this point. Ever since the Iranian Revolution, the United States has been trying regime change in one way or another. Right after the 1979 revolution, the United States financed and armed Iraq to attack Iran in what became an 8-year war. From 1979 onward, the United States has imposed sanctions on finances, on individuals, on Iranian trade and business. Iran understands this, although I have to say they themselves were rather naive at many points. I spoke to Iranian senior diplomats, and I felt they were very soft in a way, that they thought we can negotiate with the United States. And I could only tell them, don't trust the United States. They don't keep their word at all. And twice now during negotiations, the United States and Israel have attacked them. So I assume that they won't do that again. So in order for this war to stop, not only does the United States have to stop its attack clearly, but there needs to be security arrangements. Iran says no more American bases in the Gulf. If I were the leaders of Bahrain or the Emirates or the Saudis, I would invite the United States go home. You're not really protecting us. We're just targets for attack. This I would have told them before this war. In fact, I did. I don't believe in having American military bases as a means of protection. I think it is only a means of losing one's sovereignty as fast as possible. So, and becoming a target for attack. I told that to the Ukrainians for many years as well. So my point is that Iran needs security arrangements. This is for sure. Iran has said, it said it for the last 25 years, they don't want a nuclear weapon. I don't know whether that is still the view, by the way, because after you've been attacked so many times, you may change your mind. But there's no doubt that repeatedly the Iranians said, we want to be under International Atomic Energy Agency scrutiny, but we want not to be tricked and punished and attacked for that as well. So that's a second issue. Go back to the JCPOA. Which was a valid agreement that Trump and Netanyahu ripped up in 2018. That's the predicate to everything that's happening right now.
It was 4% enrichment that the agreement talked about at that time, the JCPOA.
Yes, yes. There were absolute limits. The Omani intermediary in the recent round of negotiations that was truncated by this war said that the Iranians had made further major concessions on enrichment, and the war came the next day because the United States is not really interested in this, and Israel's not really interested in this issue. They're interested in regime change rather than negotiation. And then the truth of the matter is, ultimately, this war, like wars that have taken place now for the last 30 years, from Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Iran. These are wars that Israel has called for and induced the United States to join because Israel, in a mad way, is a crazy way, is trying to expunge the Palestinian people. And the way that it's doing that is to overthrow any government that supports the Palestinians. This is explicit policy of Israel. It goes back decades. It's a doctrine that Netanyahu introduced 30 years ago called clean break. This war is part of that strategy. My view for decades, and even more today, is that the only way to really end these wars is for Israel to live within its borders of the 4th of June, 1967, which are the internationally legally recognized borders, and for there to be a state of Palestine next door. And that should be part of a settlement. Of course, this is easy to achieve on the one side. The United States simply has to drop its veto in the UN Security Council to the state of Palestine becoming a member state of the United Nations. The U.S. is the only barrier to this. Of course, at a deeper level, the United States has to tell Israel, the game is up. Your 30-year effort to expunge the Palestinian people has proved to be a disaster, stretching from Libya to Iran. The whole region is aflame. It's over. There will be a state of Palestine, and you have to accept that fact.
And maybe sign the NPT as well, Israel?
Yeah, I don't think that they could sign it. They'll still have all of their nuclear weapons, so they may or may not sign it. But the point is, Israel's not going to give up its nuclear weapons. If we hold our breath for that, we're basically saying that there is no diplomacy at all, which may be the actual outcome. I would not hold out for that, but what I would say is that a state of Palestine would also end the complete breakdown between the Arab Gulf region and Iran on the other side, because this is their fight ultimately has been because of Israel's role within the region, which has been absolutely destabilizing.